What is your favorite Transect zone? Well, as you know, there is T2 is the countryside, and T3 is suburbia. T5 is the main street, T6 is the core. My favorite definitely is T4. T4 is the general area that's really messy, that has houses and townhouses and apartment buildings and corner stores and restaurants all jumbled. Nothing too large, all jumbled. And you know, when you go to cities, I have this habit that works pretty well, is you go to a city and you say, take me to your coolest intersection. Not the coolest area, like if you were to take me to only one place here, one street intersection like that, what's the coolest? And when I'm taken to such a place, it's almost always T4. You know, it's a place that has all of these elements jumbled. It's got a lot of activity, it's incredibly interesting. That's where the good bars and restaurants are. That's where the younger and older people are. Everybody cool lives in T4. It's because it's unstable. It's evolving from one thing to the other. Now, the good news is that every city has T4. The bad news is that it doesn't last very long because the wealthier people discover it and gentrify it. And then the activity, the realism, the gritty reality that made it cool eventually gets lost. And you have to go somewhere else. And I've seen this happen in Miami. I saw it happen in Coconut Grove. I saw it happen in Miami Beach. I saw it happen in Key West. You know, all of these places lost that quality of gritty messiness. We just when a place is nice, we come in. I say the dentists from New Jersey eventually move in, and it gets boring, and the cool people have to move out. Yeah, you said write a very simple code. A very simple code. Don't give me all these choices. It would be T4, the general area, where everybody could open. By the way, COVID really loves T4 because now you work at home, and it would be that's mixed use right there, and that only happens really in T4. So, actually, I'm glad you asked that question because I never thought clearly about this before. That this is what cities should be. What are the 3 most common obstacles that impede your work? 3? You gotta be kidding. There's a long list, but you did say the most common. I think the most common is that there's skepticism against change by most people. And I'm old enough to remember when my mother, who's still around, when my mother heard that something was coming that had never been done before, she got very excited about it. She was excited about the future. The future was always better. Now I find that people are very skeptical of the future, and they keep asking, where has this been done before? Not to be told it's never been done before, but to say, don't worry, it's been done before a lot of times. This isn't a risk. So there's been a complete change in the attitude towards the future. And so what we confront is NIMBYism. That's really what's against us. Now, how do you confront? Of course, NIMBY is not in my backyard, don't change anything. How do you deal with a NIMBY? The first step is to realize, credit them with actually being right. You say, yes, sir, yes, madam, you're right. In your lifetime, things have gotten worse. So I understand why you don't want things to change, because most of the change has made local life worse. There's more traffic, there's more loss of nature, things are more expensive, there are all sorts of things that are not like what you were used to. And you can bring up and say, yeah, but aren't the restaurants better now that we have these ethnic people around, Or isn't it more interesting that there's a nightlife, You can bring things up, but you have to begin by saying, I perfectly understand why you're against change. You have to credit them with that being a rational position. And the way we do it is by saying, I completely understand, describing for them exactly why they're against change, why they're NIMBYs, even better than they can possibly understand. and then explain why you're not like that. You're not the kind of thing that has made their life worse. That's the 1-2 step. So you have to grant that they're right. You have to explain to them how well you understand how change has made their life worse, and then move away. So NIMBYism is more or less 1, 2, 3. No, let me be more precise. A second thing is when things get close to an election, some of the candidates have to be against things. They take your project, which is approaching approval, and they turn it into a political football. So we always try to stay away from elections, have the project come up for discussion well away from the election so it doesn't become a political football. That's the second thing. The third thing is that there is very little money anymore. Like what the planners of the 50s and 60s had, in which you could say, not only let's build that thing, but let's build the highway, or let's build new colleges, or next build, let's completely redo the park, or let's buy land for parks. That kind of wealth that gave us the best cities is just gone. And I can't tell you how often I've had a city manager come up to me and said, Mr. Duany, we love your ideas, just don't bring any ideas that cost anything, because we haven't got any money. And it really gives me envy for that lost world where people could actually build and build big. And so what we have against us is we're measured against an America that could do big things, and we can't. We can only tinker around the edges. And sometimes people are disappointed. They say, oh, is that it? And I think somebody told me, years ago, I presented a project, and somebody came up to me and says, where's the fountain? Where's the exciting part? And I said, there ain't no exciting part. No, we haven't got a new conference center. We haven't got a new aquarium. We haven't got any of the, a Space Needle, like in Seattle. We don't have those things anymore. They're ridiculous. We don't have the money. We just got to patiently get on with what can be done. In fact, the really exciting thing that I would love to just be able to say is, can you just have the best schools in the region? Because if you do, people will move back into the city. Can we just work on the best schools? But they don't pay you for that. And they really want something. They want a rabbit pulled out of a hat. The closest thing I come to a rabbit is rationalizing parking. Like your parking's gonna work better. Smart people say, whoa, that was worth it. But most people really want a fountain. And so, yeah, we have that. Not enough money to do things anymore. That's the third. Oh my God, if you could tell 3 things to every mayor, councilor, or planning department, what would they be? This is a bunch of trick questions. What would I tell them? I would tell them the first thing is that while urban planning and making decisions for cities is not rocket science, it's a lot easier than rocket science. Possibly it's easier than writing a poem. It's not a difficult thing, but it is not nothing. You can't just walk in the door and say, here I am an American voter, or I'm an American elected official, therefore I know what I'm saying when it comes to town planning. No, it ain't that easy. Okay, you need to learn some basic things. They're not difficult to learn, but they're not nothing. That's the first thing that I would say. That's the first thing. It's not nothing. The second thing that I would say is there's a difference between a neighbor and the community as a whole. What happens is when you're trying to do something, whatever it is, whether it's to locate a school or make an outdoor park, the neighbors come in and say, I don't want that. It's going to cause traffic. It's going to cause noise. It's going to change my life. Somebody's going to poison my dog. They'll come up with something like that. And what happens in public meeting is that the closest neighbor gets the most clout. They come in and says, I live right next door to this school site, and I don't want the school. Well, that person has a lot of say because they're next door. But that is precisely wrong. That person is a vested interest. They have a selfish interest in not having the school. And all the nearby neighbors actually need to be corralled into one part, and they need to be understood as a vested interest and not confuse them with the community as a whole. The community as a whole could well want the school there. That school is a good idea, right there. That's where it's necessary. And the community should have a say and should be visibly separated from the neighbors. Okay? And there are two different voting blocks. That's the second thing I would say. You can see these aren't very pleasant things that we have to tell people. What would be the third? I would say that the third thing is that there are really quite a lot of things. There's something that I often say, look, you elected officials, you can't make really difficult decisions. The really difficult, controversial ones are very difficult because you have to be reelected. You know, your planning head has to retain their job. Let the planner you hired, i.e. me or somebody like me, give all the bad news. Don't muzzle us. You know, tell us what can go wrong. Tell us how it ends. You know, give us the. Don't expect your planner, your urban planner, to end up being popular. You know, let them bear the brunt of all the unpopular things that have to be said without getting upset. Because you can't say it. You're elected, you have neighbors, you have people, you have to like you, you have to stay here. I can leave. Let me say what needs to be said about this city. And I feel strongly that is, people don't understand it. Say, why are you being unpleasant? I said, I'm being unpleasant because I'm actually qualified to be unpleasant. And sometimes the truth is unpleasant. And let me say it. In fact, I think when a planner has done their job and they leave as the most popular person in the city, they haven't done their job at all. They've dumped all the problems on the elected officials. You know, they're beloved. Oh, I love so-and-so, but I hate my mayor. Well, that's backwards. Okay, you got to love your mayor and hate the planner. That's actually the outcome. And I think that's the third thing. You've only asked for 3 things, so that's enough. They're pretty big. Oh my God, this is the 3 in their head thing. If you could tell 3 things to every developer, what would they be? Boy, okay. This I take very seriously. You know, I'm the son and grandson of developers. And they had, my father taught me something called the third fist, which is that they said you can deal with any 2 fists that are in front of you because you can block them. What gets you is the third fist coming out of nowhere, you know. And so what my father would say is, discuss what can go wrong, because if you discuss it honestly, it won't go wrong. You put it in front of you so you can fight it. Okay, so that's called the third fist. I think some people who've seen me in interviews have noticed that I very quickly get on to things that can go wrong. You know, and if the developer doesn't like to hear things can go wrong, it means that project's not going to be built. That's a very fragile developer that doesn't have really confidence in his own project. Then there's another kind of client that comes in, and when I bring up this tough stuff, they say, wow, you're really good. I want to hire you because you're a realist. And I know those projects are going to get built. And I do believe that we have a very high proportion of built projects. Like we have, I mean, among new urbanist firms, we might have 45, 50 projects under construction. I think the next one up might have 5 or 6, you know? So we have 10 times as many. But that's because our clients, we put through not a flattering interview in which you say, oh, so you want to build a golf course? Oh, you're so brilliant. Oh, well, actually, Mr. Duany, I want to build 2 golf courses. I'm not making this up. Oh, you're even more brilliant. 2 golf courses. How can you? Well, what about 3 golf courses? Oh, a very genius. You know, and you hear people sort of flattering what developers do. Instead of questioning, what I would do is question the golf course in the first place. Like I said, do you really want to take 120 acres out of development and burden the project with a $12 billion debt? Do you really want to do that? Are you sure that many people play golf? You know, just that's a very simple example. And I question it. Okay, so a developer that is kind of brain dead and has that idea will just leave and say, God, DPZ is so unpleasant. But I think a really good developer will say, that's the kind of person I want. I want a person that questions everything. So that's the first thing that I would tell the developers. Please, please play out, game everything that can go wrong, and then it won't happen. And by the way, that includes at least 1 or 2 recessions. Do you have a plan that actually survives the recession, as an example? So that's one thing that I tell developers. I think another thing is I try to say, look, is anybody going to get up in the morning and while they're taking their morning shower, figure out how to kick that ball forwards that day? Because there's so much inertia, so much resistance to things happening that if you don't get up in the morning and move it forward, it ain't going to happen. You know, this isn't just playing with a spreadsheet. Somebody has to be out there and make sure that the asphalt guy has showed up and that they're doing the right thickness of asphalt and that the edges are neat and that they're not cheating you, basically. You know? And then you have to figure out whether the pipe, and that's even make sure that the pipes are already in. Who's going to do that? You know, unless it's you. You know? And so I would say the second thing is that you have to be a person that works and enjoys working with reality and not just with a spreadsheet. Second thing, I think that the first generation of developers that I work with were very much, they loved the dirt. They loved the dirt. They loved the reality of building things. They loved the reality of meeting people that were going to give you the permit. They loved the reality of meeting the people who were going to buy the project. I think the new generation, and by the way, none of them went to business school. I think the new generation, having gone to business school, has a great confidence in the abstraction of a spreadsheet. And they think that that's work. They think they're sort of goosing the spreadsheet and changing the numbers around like that. By the way, the old guys had spreadsheets too, but every calculation was different. It took all day. You changed one variable, everything took all day. Now you just press a button and you think that's work. It isn't work. I think if you're a spreadsheet kind of person, you should go into another business that goes and mass produces something. You know, mass produce electrical cords, anything. But do not, if you go into development, you have to really love reality. That's the second thing that I test. By the way, it doesn't mean that both guys aren't nice guys and smart. They're both smart. They're both nice people. Nice people come to our office, but I trust the ones that really want to get their hands dirty. That's very important. What's the third thing about developers? I would say, look, I know that a developer who's going to build a community, and we build communities, not just housing, okay, that you are building a community for yourself. Forget about it's autobiographical, okay? It's the community you want, that's why you're doing it. It's for yourself to live in. And I said, that's really a wonderful idea if you're a normal, likable person. But if you're a weirdo, don't try it, because there are not enough of you. And I can remember Robert Davis being an incredibly friendly guy that loved good spaghetti sauce, you know? He wanted to have a good night. He wanted to have a martini at night. He wanted to have the New York Times in the morning. He loved cooking. A normal person, and his Seaside is very autobiographical, but he was a normal person. Lots of people wanted to be like him. Not too long after that, we did a project for a New York, charming, absolutely charming New York Wall Street guy. And he was actually possibly a nicer guy even than Robert Davis. But he was weird, you know? And he was a kind of elitist in strange ways, and he would say he was strange in the sense that he believed in high art, And he wanted every building to be a masterpiece. That's the first time we met Charles Barrett, actually. And he wanted every building, and he would say, he would have an assistant, and he would come up to a drawing and say, that is a very high quality building. You know, and it was. But in the end, there weren't that many people that gave a damn about a really high quality building. What they wanted is a corner store that actually sold normal stuff. He would, you know, he would bring the best pastries from Brooklyn and said, well, this is in Alabama. Best pastries from Brooklyn. I said, and I realized that he was not a normal person. And the project didn't do well at all. So I understand that you want to build a utopia for yourself. You know, and then that's what's going to drive you to do it. But you've got to check that you're normal, okay? You should check with your wife. That's usually a good check. So those are 3 things. Okay, regarding your work, what do you know now that you wish you had known when you started? Let me see. There's one anecdote that keeps coming back to me. I remember being in a meeting, and we're laying out the plan, and the developer says, where's your 100% corner? And I said, what's a 100% corner? And I'm not sure I was fired instantly, but I was fired pretty close thereafter. And turns out 100% corner is the corner that has the most traffic, which is where the town center has to go. And because no one in architecture school had bothered to tell me this, I lost a client. Would you trust somebody, like if you went to a doctor and said, my liver hurts, and you said, what's a liver? I mean, I know there's something in here that's big and brown, but what do you mean a liver? Like, what's that name, what's that word mean? Wouldn't you leave that doctor pretty quickly? Okay, but I went to medical school in Cornell, yeah, but you don't know what a liver is, I'm out of here. And, oh, you mean that brown organ? Big brown organ, I know what that is, I can fix it. No, sorry, you don't know what a liver is. And I went through that. And one of the things I always try to do with my students, I try to bring up some of the lingo that developers say. Like they say things like, what's my front door? And the front door is your experience entering a project, you know? And after that, it can be less intense, it can be less excellent, but the front door, you know in a house, your front door looks better than the kitchen door. That's all they mean, is have you paid attention to the first presentation, the first arrival to the project. There's so many things like that that are essential that are not taught. And it just means it's because the academics are too specialized and the developers are too specialized. And really, I think that academics should practice and practitioners should teach. And the best education in many ways is an apprenticeship, you know, so that you don't make those mistakes. So regarding our work, what do you wish you had known when you started, like what 100% corner is, because it cost me a job. And I see that happening with young people. For example, I remember having a person in the office who was designing a pavilion with a belvedere, a place you could rise and look at a view. And the person had done it quickly and didn't get the steps right. You know, he had to go up 20 feet and he only had like 12 steps. And of course, what the young architect had done is done it very quickly. And the developer looked at it and said, those steps don't work. And the young architect said, don't worry, I did it quickly. I said, but why would you draw steps that don't work? And the whole confidence was completely broken with our firm. And it was just one architect being careless about the number of steps. But that for the developer was the problem. It's like you go to the doctor's office and there's a bloody Q-tip on the floor. I'm out of there. Okay, I'm sorry, but there's a bloody Q-tip on the floor and I'm not dealing with this guy. And that's what it meant, drawing the steps wrong. And the funny thing is that it's always the small things that are tokens of expertise. The big things don't matter. Now I'll tell you the opposite, okay? Sometimes I show up to a place and I get something so right away, that they think I'm walking on water and they trust me for days on end. Like, for example, I've learned to look at when I go to a new city, I learned to look at the sidewalks, whether they're clean, whether they're not chipped, whether the trees are trimmed properly. It's pretty rare. Somebody knows how to trim a tree. And I come in and I say, I think this city is very well run. I said, why do you think that, Mr. Duany? Well, because these things. That's like you walking into a doctor's office and he says, your eyebrows are not the same color. Therefore, you have an asymmetrical vitamin deficiency. And you say, whoa, that's a good doctor. I just walked in and I got a diagnosis, you see? And you have real confidence in that doctor. And then the doctor says, you got to cut off your left arm. You say, I trust you, doctor, because you got it right, you understood perfectly. And that's what happens. So sometimes when you get an early thing right, they keep trusting you for days on end. But you get one thing wrong, and you're out of there. You have to build trust again because you've blown it. That's the kind of thing, and that's one of the reasons that, for example, when I have young people in the office, which I really give in the office, I give a real free run. Yeah, do your thing, see what happens. When there's a client present, I check to the last little thing, because the little things are noticed. The big things aren't, but the little things are. You can do a brilliant facade, they don't notice. You got one stair wrong, or you forgot the second stair, you didn't meet fire code, you're cooked. So it's the little things that count.